Sydney and Joseph, a brother and sister, meet one day in a tiny cafe. Together, they committed a robbery some time ago that brought them $7 million, which the man carried in a big bag. They talk briefly about their short-term strategy. Sydney needs the money to support her daughter Steph and pay off debt. She regrets not being there for her kid as much as she should have been, and she wants to make amends. The two must, above all, conceal themselves so that no one can find them. Joseph says he knows exactly where it is, but they both flee into the woods as a police siren blares outside the window. They discard their old garments in a swamp and change into new ones. According to Joseph, a friend of his has given them permission to hide out in her rural home, which has long since been forgotten by everyone. They soon get to a cornfield, and as they move through it, they hear gunfire. They take a cautious approach to the house. To their astonishment, three men are shooting empty bottles with weapons while a car is parked in front of them. Sydney's shotgun doesn't frighten the troublemakers when she shouts out to them. But the three of them run off as Joseph shows up on the opposite side. The brother advises that they go quickly. They enter what seems to be an empty residence. Joseph spots a big clock right away. Just then, they hear police sirens again. Sydney advises running, but Joseph says it's exactly what they've been searching for as he gestures toward a pantry door. After that, he dashes over to the first floor clock and begins rotating its hands in a specific pattern. Sydney follows suit with the other clocks, and as they all begin to chime, the two of them enter the pantry and shut the door. At that moment, Joseph pulls out a little notebook and gives his sister instructions to dial a specific number on the old telephone in the room and to end the call as soon as she has said the necessary words. They can hear the sounds of police officers looking for them outside. Sydney calls, says a few things, and then hangs up right away. They go outdoors after a while when Joseph opens the door. Nobody is in the area. Clocks have stopped once more, the house is tidy and comfortable, and everything is in its proper place. Joseph winds the clock and the living room is directed. Although Sydney is shocked that they succeeded and are safe, Joseph tells her that they need to remain there for at least 14 days. With food and beverages in a refrigerator and a stack of discs on a table to keep them occupied, they just rest on the first day. Sydney takes a bath and tries on old clothing she finds in the wardrobe, while Joseph walks and examines the ground. They prepare dinner and converse on the porch on the second day. Sydney glances at her daughter's picture and misses her, but she tells herself that everything will be resolved soon and they will be able to live without anything. Using rifles with scopes, they practice shooting and look at the paintings that hang in the house. They both appear to be very good at it. So 13 days pass. Sydney tells her brother one evening the worth of some of the things kept in this peculiar home. Sydney, however, believes that her life hasn't gone too horribly because, after all, she has a daughter. Nevertheless, her brother pledges to try his hardest to make everything right. Sydney then inquires about his female friend who gave them such a fantastic hiding place, but Joseph is unable to identify her or describe how her home operates. The woman gave him her journal only out of sympathy, he acknowledges. Sydney suddenly recalls their parents. Joseph recalls their father. She recalls their mother. Together, they remember their mother's piano-playing days. However, a song Sydney hears on a stereo system disc is the one she remembers the most. She hums the old song, but she has no idea what it's called, and then abruptly asks Joseph to take her back to her daughter. At last, the moment arrives for them to go back home. While Joseph packs their luggage and burns the leftover trash, Sydney cleans up. However, they discover that the pantry door is boarded up when they get there. Words are etched on a wood, pointing to a nearby historic mill. Sydney runs toward the mill after having a breakdown. They start looking around and find church pews in the basement. Their flashlight beam soon strikes a decaying corpse. A warning that they are trapped in a time loop is carved on a stand. They are invited to sign beneath the statement. Sydney runs away because she won't do this. She is frantic to get out of the house, but she gets sick in the field nearby. After throwing up blood, she understands that she is unable to escape the perimeter that is containing them. She is pulled back to safety by her brother. Sydney wakes up, but she finds it hard to believe what is happening. The dead at the mill, according to her brother, is the very acquaintance who gave him permission to hide there. The clock that had been a family treasure helped him identify her. They hid their traces so completely that there was no chance of rescue. Yet the two question whether anyone could possibly locate them here. The safe appears in front of them, and Joseph is forced to sign the warning. He remembers the notebook and uses the numbers on it to unlock it. There is a tape recorder inside, along with a letter instructing him to speak before shutting the door to make contact. After following instructions, Joseph hears a stranger's voice a minute later when he plays back the recording. They shouldn't be on the farm, according to the stranger. Sidney offers to give him a portion so they can depart after he informs them of the money, but the recorder stops recording. Joseph believes they're talking to someone in the future. Sidney opens and closes the safe by following her brother's instructions. In order to preserve the delicate balance of this place's powers, the voice returns and declares its intention to remove any evidence of their presence. However, Joseph understands that if the strangers didn't want them, they would have destroyed them long ago. The stranger clarifies that they must stay on the property and murder an enigmatic guest who will show up at an unspecified future date if they are to escape alive. Sidney and Joseph return to the house. To ensure they don't miss the visitor's arrival, she intends to remain in a position where she can continuously watch every approach to the house. Sidney is willing to try to break out even though she is certain that they are already done if they are imprisoned here. Joseph recommends taking shifts and establishing a watch plan. Joseph keeps watch while Sidney pours out the alcohol, and they hide their weapons in the mill and other hiding places in the yard. Sidney looks through the house systematically, looking at antique photos and portraits on the walls. After that, they trade places, with Sidney looking around the property. Nearly a year passes. The brother and sister live comfortably, can keep themselves clean, and the refrigerator consistently supplies them with food. Sidney keeps looking through the old papers, periodicals, and newspapers she discovers about the house. She practices with the bull hook, watches old broadcasts, and creates campfires at night. She tells her brother one day that she discovered that the pictures in the foyer aren't of the farm's original owners after finding a box of photos at the mill. The history of this land, which was moved here by unidentified forces, includes events leading up to the 1955 Korean War. There is no evidence that anyone stayed here after that. It appears that the Navy officer in one of the photos passed away here at about the same time, allegedly after falling down the steps. She thinks this was around the time that the people who used their technology to take over the location initially showed around. For whatever reason, they installed heating, power, and even a television to make the house their own. They made use of this downtime, and the siblings became trapped when they tried to enter. Their queries are still unanswered, though. In an attempt to convince Sidney that he is solely to blame, Joseph grows agitated. He is even prepared to place the blame on their parents. He believes that those in charge are only acting because they can and have no regard for them. They will never return home since no one ever arrives here without permission. All that's left for them is a slow death. Because Joseph is certain that Sidney doesn't trust him and believe he's prepared to leave her there, a fight breaks out between the brother and sister. However, he quickly gathers himself, and they make amends. They make their way to the lobby downstairs. Joseph notices their matching tattoos, which serve as a reminder that they are related, as Sidney watches TV. They wait a long time. The recording recorder is silent when Joseph tries to reach the strangers once more. He is worn out by the uncertainty and cries for some sign, but the tape is blank. A mysterious guest shows up on the farm one day. He uses binoculars to observe Sidney before making his way to the house and getting ready to shoot her. Joseph, however, sees him and yells to alert his sister. The bullet fails to hit its target. Joseph is then shot by the cloaked guy, but he also escapes by hiding inside the house. They start looking for the visitor, but are unable to locate him yet. Joseph tries to get to a cache of weaponry that is concealed in the field after circling the house. He is shot at by the stranger. The hooded man follows Joseph as he returns inside the house. Later, Sidney notices someone using a tape player when her mother's song is playing, and she hears music coming from the field. At his feet lies Joseph. Out into the field, Sidney goes. Sidney sustains injuries during the ensuing argument. She hides inside the house, applies bandages on herself, and finds the closet blocked again. She tries to smash down the door in her wrath, but a warning against it is posted on the board. The safe enters the room at the same time. In the meantime, Joseph regains consciousness in a church as his legs are tied. Sidney insists on going with her brother and reopens the safe connection. Both of them will perish, the strangers threaten, if she tears down the door. The visitor hits Joseph as he tries to reach for his pistol. They maintain the visitor is not Sidney's mother, despite Sidney mentioning her mother's music. The visitor, who for some reason is mute, writes a message telling Joseph to get in touch with these strangers. As they vow to explain why they are so certain it isn't her mother, Sydney is being pressured to reveal everything she knows about the visitor. Then the connection suddenly disconnects. Joseph is forced to confirm the intruder's death on a tape recorder by the visitor in the church. Joseph claims that the body is outside, that he is hurt, and that the two of them will present the body if the strangers can get in touch with Sydney. After learning of this, Sydney decides to go and save him. In the meantime, the visitor informs Joseph in writing that he is trying to find the person responsible for the murder of his family. The stranger quickly leaves when Sydney makes a commotion outside. The visitor runs away as a shooting breaks out. Sydney pursues the stranger into the home, but Joseph is able to seize his weapon and escape. Sydney knocks him down after injuring him during their altercation. She attempts to show his face. She eventually succeeds in removing his mask and identifies her now-adult daughter, Steph. Joseph interrupts and shoots the guest as she tries to make sense of things. The gunshot strikes Sydney as she tries to protect Steph. Steph flees via the pantry and is left alone while the brother laments the death of his sister. On the tape recorder, Joseph informs the stranger that the guest is left. After burying Sydney, he waits by the mill as directed. He is taken to an unidentified place where he encounters a woman and the stranger from the tape recorder. They apologize for hoping for a better result and claim that he and Sydney disobeyed the rules and will be removed. Joseph pleads for a final opportunity. He is sent back to the first day at the cafe when the strangers agree. He tells Sydney that he has experienced this cycle numerous times and was powerless to stop her unintentional death. He informs her that the only way to put an end to it is to immediately kill him, collect the money, and then go back to her daughter. As police sirens come, Sydney shoots Joseph and runs away, in the hopes that this time things will be different for her.